A very good evening and welcome to the Montage of Singapore. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Renuka, as you all know, and this is a show that started 5 weeks ago, around that time. And the idea behind this was to bring the residents of Singapore from across different ethnicities and communities and culture, and of course, start with something which is called a dialogue that brings us all together. And it is a show that is presented by MastiAVI Media Network and supported by the National Integration Council. Well, on the Montage of Singapore, we've come a long way. We have already featured the grassroots leaders, we've had entrepreneurs, we've of course had community champions, and we've had philanthropists. We have talked to people who have different lifestyles, and that is how they are influencing others in the community. And of course, apart from that, we've had many more such individuals who've talked and shared about their Singapore stories. What is Singapore? Well, let's take a look at Juchiat, near Katong. Let's talk about Kampong Glam. Let's talk about Little India. Why do I say that? Well, because the Chinese, as we know, are forming the majority part of the Singapore fabric. And when we say Chinese, well, there's also Hokkien and Teochew, and there's Cantonese and many more. And then we talk about the Malays, the Javanese, and of course, various Malay subgroups. And then we get into the Indians, who are very much a part of Singapore by way of those who speak Tamil, or the ones who are Malayalis, or then there's the Sikhs, and then there is a lot more from that subgroup as well. And then of the Eurasians, of course. And when we talk about Eurasians, well, that's something like a European and an Asian lineage, and that's how they got together, mainly the Dutch and the Portuguese. And well, then there is the Peranakan. And then we've got the expatriates, the Americans, the British, the Korean, the Japanese, and many, many more. Talk about Singapore being a little red dot. Seriously? All right, on the Montage of Singapore today, well, I'm going to be introducing you to someone very special who is from a minority of a minority community. Well, just about 800 of this community in Singapore. But that's not what the show is all about. I'm talking about the Dawoodi Boras. And they are very special because their focus has always been on education, on business, and community work. And then when I realized that out of those 800, I know a few of them, I felt very, very privileged. So I thought, let's leave the communities aside, but let's bring this person in who has highly impressed me with her stories and about the stories that she shares with the future generation as well and the leaders. We'll take a short break here and we'll be back on the Montage of Singapore with my very special guest, ladies and gentlemen, 40 years of being Singaporean, the highlights of yesterday, and then I'm going to introduce her to you in just a little bit. Stay tuned. My guest today is not going to allow me to not smile. And same with you. The Queen is right here.
Yeah,
Welcome, Davy.
Hello.
Daisy.
The Queen. Was like, I came here, and like most people who come, it was the 90s. You're anxious, you're scared, you're a stranger. You don't know anything. They looked at me and they said, go to Vasantam. And what happened is getting into Under One Roof just gave me direct, it was like I nosedived directly into Singapore. Yeah. I nosedived into what is heartland. Yeah. Now, that's the key part about integration. When you say, I'm going to make a life, is it that I'm going to just make a life with people of my own kind? Mm-hmm. Or is it that I'm going to embrace more and more people, make them, include them in my life? Mm-hmm. There's very little difference between all three. Why? You don't believe me, Lay? Okay, no, don't believe law. So you're like, don't play.
Yeah.
You want a makan or not? Yeah, don't kachao. All those kind of things. Yes. When I'm here, I love it because there is sanity. I love it because we are so sanitized, we're clean, we're orderly, all these words.
We love it. Yeah.
You optimize the experience.
You do.
Of being in Singapore. What does this country mean? How are the people? What makes them tick? Why are they what they are? And how are you going to become family to them? But integration is also about us integrating with
with the Malays.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
And the Chinese, who are our majority
Absolutely.
in this country. Everybody tries. And the trying part is what we talk about when we say integration.
True.
It's easy to continue saying Tampines or whatever you want. But when that somebody comes to you and says, it's Tampines, and then you remember that and you do that. So because she is very highly qualified, she's a publisher, and she's going to talk to you about diversity, about equity, about inclusivity, and you're going to have a really good time.
I always say that life is also a theatre. Let me get a little philosophical here, yeah. And we get different opportunities. We get opportunities to hone our skills. We get opportunities to meet our fellow actors in and out, and the script changes every day.
Yeah.
But what happens is that we change along with the script, and we embrace all our fellow actors,
Yes.
right? And on that note, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Welcome back on Masti Media Network's Montage of Singapore. My name is Renuka and I welcome you to episode 12 of this beautiful series, which is curated specially by Masti Media Network and supported by the National Integration Council. Well, today's guest, as I mentioned just before the break, is supposed to be a very highly professional, I would say, a highly literate professional and a publisher. She's a true believer of diversity, equity, and fairness. She's actually been responsible for bringing Singapore's education system, a part of it, to the world map. And she's done a lot more than that. She actually leads teachers for trainings and a lot more to upskill themselves as well. Well, with someone as literate and as educated and as impressive as that in the profile, I can only say that today is the time when I'm going to learn so much. And this is the reason why this series is so important for each one of us. Well, let's see who's in the spotlight today in just a little bit. Dr. Duriya, welcome to Montage of Singapore. How are you?
I'm very well. Kem cho, Renuka be?
Majama. This is such a surprise. My God, are you going to ask me questions throughout now?
Why not? It's a dialogue after all.
It's
but
a dialogue.
Seriously, Renuka, thank you very much for having me. And thank you for those kind words. Some of them quite undeserved.
Oh, come on. These are all from your profile and these are all very much researched. I know you're just being humble, but that is exactly what you are. Thank you so much for accepting to be here, Dr. Duriya. You know what? I was thinking today, I said, so are we saying that all the people who came on our show are not from Singapore? Because you're the first Singapore wala that I'm bringing here. So tell me, what's about this Singapore wala as the family name?
Yeah, well, as people who come from, northern part of India might know that it's a quite a common way of relating, the surname comes from either your job or your place or your native place or something like that. So that's very common. So my father-in-law, when he used to return back to the hometown in Gujarat, everybody would say Singapore se aaya che. So he became Singapore wala, meaning he's come from Singapore. So somehow that then ended up in his legal documents, right?
Okay.
So when he naturalized as a citizen of Singapore, that transferred to his passport, and hence the rest is history. But it's a great conversation starter.
It is.
Every time I fly, certainly, the stewardesses will come to ask me, ma'am, we're quite curious about your surname. Is this really your surname? It's a great conversation starter, and I carry the name with pride, certainly.
Absolutely, and I do too now. I may not have a Singapore wala on my family name, but I'm definitely a Singapore wala, I assure you that. So, Dr. Duriya, tell me, you moved to Singapore about almost 4 decades ago.
Yes.
So what's your Singapore story? I'm really inquisitive.
So I moved here after marriage.
Uh-huh.
Was very young, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And to me, I was like, Singapore was a really exotic place. I was brought up in Mumbai, which is, a melting pot, very cosmopolitan city, etc. But Singapore was amazing for me. the most amazing thing about Singapore was the libraries, the national libraries.
You've always been into books.
I have. I thought I was in heaven, where you could go walk into a library and borrow 7 books at a time. That concept didn't exist in Mumbai at the time. I don't know if it exists now, but I mean, certainly in school, etc., I was privileged to, be in a book-rich environment, but to be able to walk in the library and borrow 7 books, that was unheard of. And amazing. I used to hoard the library cards. In those days, we had library cards. I used to hoard everyone's library cards so that I could carry.
Get more books.
Yes. I mean, that was amazing.
God. And you're talking to one of those who hated going to the library. I tell you, I was carrying those books home meant now I have to study them. You know
oh my gosh, Renuka, you have led a sad life.
No. So I have actually moved on to the online version.
Okay.
I've done that on time. Yeah.
You have redeemed yourself now.
I have. and the movies that I like to watch are also based on books. So right. I'm trying to impress you.
I don't know if that counts, but okay.
let's do it for the heck. Just because I'm the host here. Come on, we can be nice to me today. So tell me, when you moved to Singapore, of course, at that time, there were not many immigrants. And of course, you moved here and you must have seen that most of the people were from the 4 major communities, right? So what were the great, exciting parts and the not so exciting parts that happened?
I think the newness was, as a young person moving to a new place, just looking at everything, the people, the interactions, was very different for me. Because in Mumbai, which is truly a melting pot, we were all Indians. In India, everyone's Indian, right?
Yeah, totally.
So the concept of race is never at the forefront there.
Never.
I mean, there could be regionalism or whatever else,
true,
but not race. And so it was the first time that I actually became conscious of race.
There are races.
Yeah. I mean, I always thought it was human race and that's it, right? I mean, in fact, I've never had to fill in that section on a form where it's race, and sometimes just to be cheeky, I would write human.
You did that.
I did.
I'm going to do that from now.
So that was an interesting thing, but it's also the understanding. I remember back in those days, we had a neighbor who was Chinese, and it was a lovely family. And every time I met her, or my mom-in-law used to live with, she's now passed on, but she would ask her in Malay, "Sudah makan?" And when I asked her, what does that mean? She said, "Have you eaten already?" I'm like, why is she always asking whether we have eaten? It's
actually,
how does that, what is the story behind that? Then I realized that that's a traditional, it's a typical way of greeting in I think it's Hokkien or Teochew, I forget what group she belonged to, but what her dialect was. But that was an interesting, introduction to me, and then really just learning about different people and different cultures. To me, it was fascinating because, I came from a place where you're learning about that all the time, right?
That is true. So, yeah. But that's lovely. And the challenges that you had was it easy to kind of just gel into the whole system? Because you probably completed your education afterwards as well.
Yes.
I'm just guessing.
Sure. Yeah? Yes, you're guessing right. It doesn't, in summation, I think it was a smooth journey. I forget now, but yes, there have been bumps along the way. I think in particular, and you made reference to the fact of being a minority within a minority.
Yes.
And so attire was one thing. People look at you and wonder, who you are, where are you from, and attach stereotypes to it. I remember when I joined the Open University, for example, and
that was in Singapore.
In Singapore,
okay.
I was in the inaugural batch, actually, the first batch of students at Open University, and people used to wonder. My co-students used to really, my classmates really, would wonder who is this person, and wouldn't really talk, wondering does she even know English? She's dressed so traditionally. But as time passed, we became friends. We became great friends. I used to do a tutorial. After the tutorial, I did graduate as the gold medalist of the cohort.
Right.
But those, that used to sometimes kind of pinch, that people have a already preconceived notion of you based on how you're dressed, and that shouldn't be the case, because you're making an assumption. I remember once we were, I'm not sure whether it was at a polyclinic or a hospital. We went to collect medicine at the pharmacy, and the pharmacist, it was medicine for me and I was receiving it, but would talk to my husband in English, thinking I wouldn't know English.
She wouldn't understand.
Yeah. And then my husband said, well, actually, you can talk to her. She has a master's in English.
I love that. But this is not just typical of, if you talk about your community or your attire, this is typical of all, right? So even if we look at the other communities, many times people would just kind of assume that, there's these preconceived notions, as we say, that people are just assuming, this person looks like this, and therefore that is why we say in this world it is so important to dress up according to the other person's point of view and not according to what you want, because that's, if you want to avoid that kind of perception, then you have to live up to what others want you to be.
Well, I don't know if I really agree with that, Renuka.
Good.
Because that's, you have to dress based on what your values and what your faith is. And I mean, as long as you're not offensive, the other person really needs to accept that, because why would you make a judgment about somebody's linguistic ability or professionalism based on how they're dressed?
But that's the world.
Yeah, but that needs to change, right?
Exactly. That needs to change.
And it is changing. I think it is changing.
It is.
We have come a long way.
Maybe not across the world, but slowly the change happens. And that's what we are here to talk about acceptance and, of course, celebrating each other's differences.
Of course.
Exactly. So I was thinking that with that wonderful story of 40 years, we'll move to the next phase of our show here. That is quite a story, by the way, right? Because the moment you just move in from a different country, you're all wide-eyed and you're kind of expecting that everything's going to go very, very exciting. And then suddenly you come across the goods and the not so goods. But then you realize that with the way you are going to win hearts, because that's exactly what you believe in. It's really important for you to believe in something, right, as you move on. All right, so we believe that it's time for us to move on to the next section. A short break here, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll be back with the joy of Singapore with Singapore Wala. Welcome back, and of course this is Montage of Singapore. A quick look at our dear messages. I have a message coming in from Deb Soma saying hi to me, and at the same time commenting on what you just said, Dr. Duriya. She says, indeed, Singapore is always warm and welcoming for all of us. That's true. That's so true. All right. Moving on. Now, the thing is that I have these two cards here. And because you have seen my earlier episodes, when somebody is always looking for books and things to read, I cannot go wrong here. She must have seen all of them. So she knows there is one question that I always ask everybody. And there's another one, which is new. Oops.
All right.
So the question for Dr. Duriya is right on the screen here. What is your biggest source of information or inspiration in Singapore?
Right. So currently, my biggest source of information is Auntie Serene. She's the auntie in the office, right? But she has all the latest. Where are the sweetest oranges? Are the durians in season yet? Where should we be going for a nice coffee? She has all of this. So that's my source of information.
Okay, that's a great point. But that is the most authentic.
Yes.
Because seriously, it's not WhatsApp forwards.
Yeah.
These are real things, right?
It's real time, right?
Right. And if I were to say inspiration, so apart from all the positives that you've just mentioned about Singapore, is there something specific that always comes to mind when we talk about inspiration?
So, you alluded to it earlier that I've had the privilege and good fortune of actually being part of the Singapore education story. I brought Singapore maths to many parts of the world. And as part of that, telling that story, telling the Singapore story, you begin to own it. eventually, right?
Totally.
And so that, to me, that is a very big source of inspiration, the Singapore story. How, and I often say that we shouldn't even exist by right. If you think about it, no natural resources. We didn't even ask to be independent. That famous visual of our late first Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, crying to announce, when he announced on the steps of City Hall that we'd been made independent, and yet here we are, with such a high, so much wealth that we have created, and it's about planning. It's about, and that's, to me, that's the inspiration.
Really.
And it's, I mean, obviously it's at a national level, but I think there is a story for each of us at an individual level, that if you persevere and really work hard, you can succeed.
I was very much intrigued by bringing Singapore math to the world map. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Oh my, it does. A little is not possible.
Okay, tell me everything about it.
Oh gosh, then we'll need a lot of time. Well, I had the good fortune of, representing the work of hundreds of teachers and ministry officials in Singapore. Well, there are these international exams called TIMSS, Trends in Math and Science Studies, and PISA, which benchmark education systems in math and science performance. And they do it, regularly over a period of time. And for the past many years, Singapore has actually been either on top or in the first 3 nations of in the world, in the education system in the world, in both math and science, and recently in literacy. You would have read that in the newspapers as well. And so it was my good fortune to actually bring the Singapore math product international, because a lot of other countries, the United States, Australia, New Zealand included, were actually performing not even up to the benchmark. And so they were wondering, what is it that Singapore does that makes us so successful, makes our kids do so well? And so we were able to then, bring that math, the pedagogy, as well as the textbook program to many different countries.
Lovely. Oh, wow. But I've always wondered, and one of our guests also mentioned that, if she were to leave Singapore, she would not miss PSLE.
I remember this.
I want to go back to that and say, I know that our math is amazing and our kids are doing amazing, and hats off to them for really coping up so well, and to the parents. And recently I was reading that one of the fathers even left his jobs really to be with the child and make sure that he does well in PSLE. So do you think that is really...
So, I remember there was a recent letter in the newspaper, in the forum as well, saying, the maths questions are very difficult. Look, I think, if we think about education around the world, we would realize how privileged we are. How wonderful our schools are, how great our teachers are. If you think about the pandemic, our schools were shut for a very short time. In fact, quite possibly the shortest time in the world.
True.
And, the government prioritized the education of the children over everything else when it opened up, right?
That's right.
So that is the focus on education. Now, when you talk about the pressures on education, and I have to say that, I've brought up 2 sons myself, and I am probably guilty at that time of probably putting pressure on my sons as well, if truth be told. But I guess with age comes wisdom, and you realize that in the scheme of things, that education is not limited to schooling. It continues. And today we are fortunate that, even if a child doesn't do brilliantly in PSLE, it's not the end of the world.
True.
It's just, and you have to then also look at children as whole human beings.
Absolutely.
And not just the sum of how they did in the PSLE
The sum
exam.
of PSLEs.
Yeah.
Okay,
and that's
great.
Just, that is not the validation of who that person is.
Absolutely. I think we are going to use this part of yours and spread it far and wide to make sure that children feel so much better about, not being judged on the basis of their PSLE.
At this point, I'm just going to keep reminding my own 2 sons because to spare my grandchildren.
Exactly. Please don't make them go through PSLE, please.
No,
And
even
your
if they do,
grandchildren.
they don't need to have the stress of it.
True, true. And the grandchildren are going to fall back to this video.
I'm sure they will.
All right. So, because we must always listen to the elders, this one. All right. So, there is, of course, the favorite question that if you were to leave Singapore, what is it that you're going to miss the most? And what is it that you're not going to miss?
Wow. What will I miss the most? I think it's the feeling of home.
Uh-huh.
You know, I mean, if this, I could, that list would be endless, but if I were to capture it in one phrase, it would be the feeling of home. The feeling when you land back in Changi Airport and you
Oh, yes. I know.
You know, that
Yes.
there is nothing in the world that can, compare. And that feeling comes because you have that feeling of security, you have the feeling that you have a home that you're going to go to, and of course the familiar tastes and smells and
you walk
sounds.
with pride, and you know that everything's going to work perfect over there.
And of course there's durians and chicken rice and mee goreng.
Absolutely. And
there's
I'm
Tekka
hungry.
Market and Geylang. I told you the list is endless.
Okay, what is it that you're not going to miss? Come on.
What will I
This
not
is the
miss?
tough one.
Yeah. Well, I think I won't miss the COE, certainly.
The high cost of living. Yeah.
I think ultimately, I think that, and I guess we are all, so caught up in the rhythm of life that we forget to be friendly. Often, if I find that, we tend to be looking down when we're in a lift rather than, making eye contact and just smiling and saying hi, or even in the MRT, etc. So that's something probably.
But that's something I've seen, that when we are overseas, when you're in Europe or the US, people are generally talking to each other. They are kind of, they don't care. They just look at you. Even the bus driver, you're getting onto a tourist bus, you're just getting onto a normal bus. He looks at you, hey, just do this. Hi, how are you? And
that's true.
That never happens in Singapore. When you get on a bus, when you get on, any of these public transport, you kind of, at least for me, many times I have to sense the mood of the driver, according to which I have to change my personality. Because if I have a chatty driver for a cab, I know that I'll be at ease. But most of the times, that 1 minute of delay, if you have not been at your place, or if you've texted and said, okay, come to this other, lobby and not here, and then you're worried, don't know how he's going to react. Do you think that happens?
It does. Well, you are right that there are certain, cultures and certain places where you do find people are very friendly. For example, if you were, even taking a walk in the park in Auckland, you'd have people just say, hi, how are you doing?
Exactly.
And, they'll sit and have a chat with you and stuff. Maybe we don't need to go to that extent. But just a hi, hello, how are you doing? How's your day going?
It's fine.
We're
happy with just the basics,
right? And, sometimes I do, like, when I go out of my way, then like people are like, what's wrong with her?
Exactly. I do that sometimes. But, I learned it. I also learned it from a fellow colleague some time ago who was from a different community. And this person told me, you know what? Life gets much easier if you were to just say hi to somebody passing by. He's gone, you are gone, but you just smile.
Yeah.
So I tried that yesterday. I was coming out of my basement car park, and the moment I came out, there were 3 children crossing the road. Now, I could have gone, but I stopped. And they went by and they smiled, and I smiled. I felt so good about myself, So proud.
Yeah. I mean, whatever their reaction, it just, lifts up your day. It brought a smile to your face.
Exactly.
You exercised your facial muscles.
Love this totally. All right. On this, I have a question which is coming up on the screen right now. It says, hello, Dr. Duriya. It is interesting to hear your Singapore story. Do you feel that our Bora community keeps aloof from the local Muslims? How can we increase collaboration?
That's a nice question. Thank you for that. I don't think that we do. In fact, just last weekend, we hosted the Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Lawrence Wong, to lunch at the masjid, along with many other dignitaries and community leaders and so on. The week prior to that, we had colleagues from MUIS, Majlis Ugama Islam Singapura. They had requested to visit us because they wanted to learn about our madrasa system and the lifelong education process. So we do have a lot of outreach programs. Even the children of the madrasa in our masjid, as they go through their education process, we integrate them. They're brought, there's a lot of community programs like delivering food to orphanages and so on and so forth. So at a community level, and then we have things like beach cleanups and stuff like that. So all of that goes on at a community level. But even at an individual level, we have lots of very community-focused individuals who are in their own capacities doing a lot of charity work, outreach work, and so on.
Which your community is known for. And of course, I wanted to bring that to the next section, which is called Community Champions, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to continue talking to Dr. Duriya. And of course, we will talk about what she has brought here. Because if you see on the table, there are a few books that I see, right? And I'm wondering, are they written by her? Because she is a well-known publisher. But what is inside them? What is it that she is doing to make sure that the future, the leaders of tomorrow, the generation of tomorrow is nurtured with the right thoughts and brought up according to, of course, the concept of Montage of Singapore that we are focusing on, the integrated community. Stay tuned for that.
Available anywhere across the world with the app Radio Masti 24/7. The 24-hour station offers a vast variety of programs filled with local, global and Indian content along with Bollywood gossip and updates. Make sure you add Masti to your lives. Download the app today and stay energized and connected on the go. Radio Masti 24/7 Live, Singapore's only Bollywood radio since 2009.
And of course, on the Montage of Singapore, I'm being told that my hair is not looking very nice right now. But well, the show is live right now from Masti Media Network and of course supported by the National Integration Council. And hair is not the topic. That is what I keep telling my people here. Well, the topic right now is that I have a wonderful guest who takes her job as a grandma extremely serious. She has 4 grandchildren. Well, yeah, don't go by what she looks. Okay, she's a very stern grandmother. Okay, she's been smiling with me, but that doesn't mean she's not serious. She just told her sons right now that the grandchildren should not go through PSLE as far as possible. But then obviously they have to do it, right? It's very important. After she goes home, she's a different person. But what I hear is, Dr. Duriya, that you do talk about fairness and equity and, a lot more that you believe that the children need to know right from the time that they're very young. It needs to be imbibed. It needs to be really embedded in them, right? So tell me, why? Why do you think that? Are there reasons that have brought you to this point, or is that something that you always believed in?
Well, before I get into that, Renuka, I just want to clarify, since we are live and this is going to, exist on the internet.
I know you're going to do that. Must do PSLE. It is very important.
That PSLE is part and parcel of the process, but we have to understand what its role is. It's just a gateway to get into the next level, but it is not the gateway to heaven or something.
Yeah, okay. Yes. So kids, you still have to do that, basically. That's what she's saying.
Yes. And Huzaifa and Abdul Qadir, if you're listening, this one's for you. So to the point about, fairness and equity and respect, really. And, it's been part of the Singapore conversation as well. Last year, I was part of a citizens work group where we looked at the national symbols of Singapore, one of which was the creed, the national creed, which begins with regardless of race, language, and religion.
That's right.
Right? And that's something that I think we are at this point in Singapore where we take that very seriously. And it's a great point to be in Singapore because, you can, if you feel something is not right, you can speak up. and people will listen. And so for me, that is a great point. But the flip side of it is the fact that we have to address it now, right now. If we feel that there is, inequity happening or whatever, what we're doing is damage control, right? Because it's happened. This is ingrained in the psyche of people. We have to set it right now. So with adults, it's part and parcel, and we have to deal with it, and we have to do it. And it's great that we are doing it. You don't feel afraid of having that conversation.
Absolutely.
I mean, this program is evidence of that, obviously. But at the same time, when I think about children, I feel that it is important that children don't have to go through the same experience. And the way to do that is by exposing them, particularly through stories, to get these concepts of equity, of fairness, of respect, and for everyone's dignity. And stories are such a great medium.
That is true.
I have a favorite quote from Professor Rudine Sims Bishop, who says that stories are wonderful because they work as mirrors, as windows, and as sliding glass doors. So for me, children should be able to see themselves in the stories that they're reading, but they should also be able to recognize and respect others in the stories that they read. And we should expose them like that. And then they should be able to understand through the medium of the story how something is right or something needs to be changed. And rather than talk in theory, what I did was I brought my favorite book, The Ugly Five by Julia Donaldson. I'll just give you a very, very quick synopsis of the book.
Yes.
The Ugly Five, Julia Donaldson wrote this book after a safari in Africa. And typically in Africa, you talk about the Magnificent Five, right? Which is, the elephant, the giraffe, the zebra, the lion, and so on, the rhino. But she heard about the Ugly Five, which are these 5 animals which are regarded as like really grotesque and not worth looking at. And so she wrote this story where these animals, the Ugly Five, are saying, we are the Ugly Five. I'm so ugly. I'm so ugly. Because they have been naturalized. They've been hearing this around them, that everybody is calling them the Ugly Five. So they start believing that they are ugly. And, until at the end of the book, it's their babies who are saying, you're beautiful. You're wonderful. And so that to me, that was a great, point of epiphany almost, where it's like, look, children are not born with these prejudices and notions. And unfortunately, sometimes maybe the process of learning and education and socialization, I don't think it's education, but socialization, brings all these attitudes to them. And so if we can change that through the stories, and this was something that I used to we used to read this, my oldest granddaughter and I, as we went to school every day when she was in kindy. And she would say, but like when she looked at the vulture, and there is something about, his neck, he's got this wobbly neck. She said, but it's so beautiful. The pink color is so beautiful. And I thought, look at this child, she's only looking at the beauty of it.
Correct.
And she said, why is it they are called ugly? It's not right to call anyone ugly.
Absolutely.
And that was the innocence. And I'm like, why we should never lose this. We should never lose this.
Then what happens? What happens when people grow up? What happens when they start realizing that now, oh my God, there are so many races around us, so many communities, we should restrict ourselves, we need to stop smiling. You know how things happen. Just yesterday's show, I was mentioning that when I got into the elevator, there was this 1.5, 2-year-old, Nadira, that was her name. I still remember because she was really cute. It goes in, hi, like that, as if she knew me for ages. And even after she got up, she kept saying hi to me, and then I asked her name. She kind of spelt it out for me. It was really beautiful, and the parents were right there smiling. So I guess I would totally agree with you that it's how we educate them right from childhood at home, what we tell them, how to talk to strangers, and then as they grow up, how to really understand what is right and what is wrong. But then still have these basic foundational elements very right.
Exactly.
But do you think that our education system today, and I'm not sure, that is why I ask you, do we have dedicated session maybe for, integration or some sort of these general discussions not in the direct hitting way, not in a way that, guys, you must integrate, but in a way that these are a very basic parts of Singapore, and therefore they should be maybe 1 hour a week. I'm not saying much, but do you think we have that, or is that something we should, for that matter?
To be honest, I think that our education system, the way the materials, the course materials are developed, the lessons are planned, they do perpetuate this notion of respect, of dignity, etc. I don't think we need to be chanting slogans and mottos and stuff, because that's very artificial. But it's a way that we come across people, the way, in the way that they are presented. And having been part of that education, journey, the development of it, I have seen how, the national education values were introduced very gradually, and now you can see that they have been completely infused into our curriculum. So I think that the formal curriculum, the way the teachers deliver it, etc., promotes these values. But I think perhaps, those of us who have already moved out of the system, adults, we bring our own values and attitudes in the home to the children.
That's
so
true.
There was some time ago, there was this child that I was talking to, was so distraught, and I said, what happened? And she said, they call me monkey face in school. And I'm like, but why? There's nothing in the school, no teacher, no textbook would have perpetuated this, obviously.
Absolutely.
So this child has obviously got it from somewhere, either the friends that she saw or people that she is coming across in the home. And so to me, it's not just this child who was impacted, but the child who said it is also a victim.
Absolutely.
So both need to be educated.
Yeah.
And for that reason, I'm this great believer in stories, because stories are very non-threatening way of bringing values, etc. And stories also have to be written to, first and foremost, to be entertaining, right? So it brings me to the other things that I have brought. And these are actually the stories that I have written for my grandchildren. They've got published, which is a great thing. But Rook in the Minas is written for my second granddaughter, Rukaiya. I used to watch her feed the Minas in the garden.
Okay.
And so we wrote this story together, actually, and then about how she goes and feeds the Minas in the morning, and then they run away. But interestingly, the pandemic, while brought a lot of challenges, also brought a lot of opportunities.
Sure, yeah.
For me, it was an opportunity to observe them at play, endlessly. But also gave me a lot of ideas. And so there are some of these books that I wrote. And the reason that I'm showing them is simply because for me, I thought it was great for children to see themselves in the books. I mean, obviously this is a story about a duck, but to be able to understand that, oh, that's me, I do that.
Their character, their personality,
exactly.
the way they're growing up.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so I'm a great promoter of stories, I think, and of Singapore math.
But I'm just thinking that not every child or grandchild is as lucky to have a grandmother like, who's going to be noting everything and then writing a story, and therefore with the moral of the story trying to tell you, you did not do that right? And then you suddenly think, oh my God, I also did this. And now that my grandmother it's from a book, so obviously I better follow the right direction. But this is beautiful. And that is what stories do.
But stories don't have to just come from books. The best stories are the ones that moms have told their kids at bedtime, isn't it?
Totally.
So everything can be made into a story.
That is right. And that is what we learn. Everyday lives, we do learn that there are stories around us, there are stories within us, and there are stories to be formed that each one of us can play a very important role in. So, we don't have to be heroes. We just have to be normal people. And we just have to make sure that we follow what is right or what has been embedded in us right from childhood. Make sure there's fairness, there's, of course, equity, and there is totally amazing work that each one of us can do to bring the communities together in any part of the world. Short break here, because this is where I'm going to come back and Dr. Duriya is going to continue to talk to us, but after these few seconds. Welcome back. And of course, right now, that moment that I always wait for, and that moment means something very special that goes to our guest, and that is the beautiful Singapore skyline.
Thank you.
Do you like it?
It's one of my favorite.
Really?
Yep.
All right. So that's the set, of course, in color. And this is a beautiful one of the 13 very elegant and exclusive digital photography that is presented by 9 Studios. And of course, it is framed and to be on your wall.
Thank you.
And for you to remember us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being on the show. So, well, this is where I'm waiting for you to say, what a lovely initiative, Renuka. And
well, indeed, it's great that you are having these conversations with different people, provocative as you are, scratching under the surface.
Oh, are we still referring to the PSLE or are we going somewhere else?
Well, let's sit with a notebook and pen. But it is a great initiative, and I'm very grateful for you to have me. I've watched the other episodes as well, and they've been informative and enlightening as well. So thank you for Montage of Singapore, MastiAVI Network, as well as the National Integration Council.
Thank you so
I'm very
much.
grateful for your inviting me here.
Thank you very much for being here. But at this point, I just want to go back to a few messages that are coming here. And there is Lalita, of course, who said hello. And then there is Sapna who's saying hello as well. And then when we were talking about PSLE, there are people laughing and they really want to. Yeah. And then this one is saying that we were doing so many projects at one point. Hum to project or assignment kar ke thak gaye. And then, of course, she says, extremely nice. Very nice. So people are actually, the thing is that our journey of 13 episodes, it started a few weeks ago, as you know, but it takes everyone a little while to really get on with the show and to understand, okay, this is exactly what the show is all about, this is exactly what we're trying to derive, and then they start thinking of their stories. So today's story as well, by the way, I have not thanked Rizwana, who's a good friend who's actually been instrumental in introducing me to Dr. Duriya. So it's one person introducing my next guest, and then we get references. That is community, exactly. People believe in integration. People believe that these are the kinds of platforms that we really need to be in. And that's why they refer others to us. And that's the beauty of it. So who's going to be next on my show, Dr. Duriya? You are supposed to tell me that.
Right. The next guest is actually a very interesting one. She is, we talked about stereotypes, and she's really breaking those stereotypes and challenging people's attitudes towards women.
Yep.
And towards towards occupations as well. And so I'm not going to give it away, but she's quite unique, and she'll really make you sit up and think and listen.
Absolutely. That is what is going to happen tomorrow on the concluding episode of Montage of Singapore. But before we go away today, I must thank once again Dr. Duriya for being on the show. Thank you so much and sharing those pearls, I must say. And of course, I do want to talk to you guys there and say that integration is a two-way process. It doesn't come from a minority or from a majority. It comes from both. And that's how both just go hand in hand, moving to the next, and ahead in terms of the direction. Well, Singaporeans as a whole, they are generally very, very welcoming and inclusive. I have to say that. But the country's policies as well, they are also helping us integrate, right? So at the same time, what do we have to do? We have to just believe in each other and hold hands, say a little hi on the street and move on and forget about the differences. In fact, figure out more about each other, celebrate the cultural differences, and then, of course, enjoy the multiracial diversity that is so offered here in terms of festivities and otherwise, right? And food, which always binds us. On that note, we will meet our amazing wellness and, of course, the heritage advocate of this guest tomorrow on the show, 6 p.m. Singapore time. Be here. I will be waiting for you. Till then, take good care of yourselves from the sets of Montage of Singapore. This is Renuka saying goodbye to you. Have a great evening.